We are back on MorningLine. Our guest with us this morning, Margie Quin with End Slavery Tennessee, taking some phone calls. We're going to get to a phone call here in a minute. I just wanted to ask you this, too. With your background, do you put much stock in the value of lie detector tests? I think some of the family members in this case have been given it, and Joe Clyde Daniels, some parts of it they pass, some parts they don't. You know, what's your take on lie detector tests?
Yeah, I think as an investigative tool, it's extraordinarily valuable, and it will give law enforcement indicators.
But you can buy into it, because I know it's not admissible in court, but you feel it's enough to maybe point you in a direction?
It's a tremendous investigative tool, and it's one that law enforcement utilizes sparingly, but to great effect.
But if someone passes it who is potentially a person of interest or suspect, it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, they passed the lie detector test, it can't be them?
Right. I mean, I think we do see individuals who can pass a lie detector test for one reason or another. So they are not 100%. That's why they're not admissible in court. But again, as an investigative tool, it can be used to great effect.
Okay, let's take a call from Joe. Joe, good morning. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Nick. Just a couple of quick comments.
Sure.
In the Summer Wales case, I don't think the child was abducted. I would look at the family situation. They had a niece, an aunt that disappeared 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
And they were never found. The second thing is on the trafficking and sex part of it, I can take you to a truck stop within a mile of Channel 5, and you can get to sex, and you will see trafficking going on right there within a mile of Channel 5.
Sure. Well, you're not wrong. I mean, it's still, you know where he's talking about, and there's several places, and then there's advertisements on social media and in the back of magazines, right? I mean, it's not that you don't have problems finding where this is, and the TBI doesn't, correct?
Right. And we're so excited that Metro Nashville PD now has a specialized unit that's doing just this, because I think it's necessary. And I think the last 2 operations that we've seen here by Metro Police and by the TBI in Spring Hill go to the point that as many people as we can put on this issue, we're gonna make cases. Law enforcement is going to make cases, and every case they make, there's a victim at the center of that, and End Slavery is going to be here to provide services for that potential victim of trafficking. And so it's important that we look at this holistically. Law enforcement, it is necessary for law enforcement to make it a priority to prosecute trafficking cases, and it is incredibly important that there is a synergy that's created between law enforcement and nonprofits like End Slavery Tennessee, so that working together, that there's trust built, and we are all kind of rowing in the same direction.
Yep. We talked with someone with our kids yesterday, and they work with children. And all right, if you would then, so with End Slavery Tennessee, I mean, large part of what you do is dealing with the victims after they've been taken out of these situations and been found. So maybe talk a little bit about the evolution of this, how, you know, once they're taken out and what you do. Do you have to deprogram them? Everyone's probably different. How do you help them?
It depends on how they come into us, and it depends on there are a number of factors.
Do you have any in with you right now?
Yes.
Of course.
Oh,
right.
yeah, of course.
So, of course, don't name names or tell. But give me, is there someone that comes to mind where you can give me a example of this woman, perhaps, and how she was brought to you? Again, no names, but you know.
So the majority of our referrals are coming from either law enforcement or the Department of Children's Services. So these are confirmed cases of trafficking.
All right.
We also get referrals from folks like Our Kids. We're going to get referrals from the Family Safety Center here in Davidson County. Other nonprofits, Renewal House, the Y, Cherished Hearts Court, the new court here in Davidson County that's been operating for several years. Really revolutionary approach to trying to divert women who are coming through the criminal justice system who are trafficking victims, trying to identify them at that point, divert them into services as opposed to putting them in prison, so that they can get the kind of comprehensive treatment care that they need. you know, there's no two victims that are exactly alike, but there are generalities that are common that we see in many victims of trafficking. I will tell you that we are seeing a pretty dramatic increase in the number of juvenile referrals into our agency. A good, at least 60% of the folks that we're serving right now are under the age of 25.
And what percentage are male or female?
Probably 3% are male, but I don't think that's necessarily indicative of how many young boys are actually being trafficked. And the boys that we're serving under the age of 18 are sex trafficking victims. The ones over 18 are typically labor trafficking victims.
But the vast majority of victims are female.
The vast majority of victims are female, and right now about 8% of our victims are foreign nationals.
Okay, and all right, and they can be in range, age 17 and under. Is that what you're dealing with when we're talking about children, I guess?
Children are 17 and under,
yes. Of course, 18 is the legal age. And but then you'll also deal with adults as well?
Absolutely. We have a safe house. Right now we've got, I think, 6 women in our safe house. And again, that $3.5 million is going to allow us to expand housing, not just the number of people we're going to be able to house, but the length of time. So we were typically housing women for about 6 months. We're going to push that to 2 years, understanding that most people who have been through the kind of complicated trauma that these women and children experience, it can take them up to 2 years to really start dealing with and processing that trauma. It's extremely complicated. It's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And when you couple that with an addiction history as well, which you see in a lot of adults, addiction is going to be the ultimate means of coping with a trafficking situation. A lot of people ask me, does the addiction come first or does the trafficking come first? It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. But once you have a victim that's addicted, you have a really great means of control over that victim. And the Tennessee Code specifically addresses drugs as a means to control a victim. We can use those things to prosecute an offender.
I think one of the big concerns I would think for some of them after they've gone through your program is just wondering if, and I don't know if it's true, do some of these folks who had them, and I don't know if you were able to arrest them, you may have been able to get a John or a pimp, you know, just in that one moment, but there's, you know, there's a hierarchy, I'm sure, if it's organized. Do any of these women then worry about coming out, that they're going to come after them again to bring them back? Because in a way, they're treated like livestock. They're a commodity for these folks. And they're going to be like, oh, well, we're going to be watching for you. When you come back out, we're coming for you. And how do you address that, or does that happen?
It can, but it's not normal.
Okay.
That trafficker will move on to the next woman or young girl that they can romance and lure into that situation. In transnational organized crime cases, that's more of an issue, but we don't see that. It is not. I'll tell you what, the YWCA is dealing with a far more dangerous situation. We know that domestic violence is still killing.
Sure.
You know, Tennessee is still ranked in the top 5 year over year for intimate partner deaths, and so the YWCA, I think they're much more cognizant of.
Sure, because when they get out, that former spouse could be waiting for them.
Right.
That's a very good example on that. You know, yesterday when we had Jeremy on from the TBI Special Agent in Charge, I asked him about this, and a lot of people, you know, what they know about human trafficking sometimes, and it's all around us, which is disturbing, is the movie Taken. And to ask Jeremy about it, and he goes, look, you know, it's not really like that, but there's elements of that. I just don't, for better or for worse, for a lot of people, those types of movies from Hollywood and the like, again, which is so much fictional, is what they perceive. Is there any good in that as you look at films like this and the way it's portrayed in the media?
The problem with films like Taken and even equating sort of abduction, child abduction with trafficking, the white panel van and in the mall parking lots, the problem is that it's a myth, and it creates confusion, I think, in the public, and it distracts us from what trafficking really is. And it muddies the water when we try to talk about and really tell people what trafficking is, how it happens. Again, keep your kids off the internet. We can do a lot of good if we can keep our kids off the internet.
And you're saying off the internet, meaning, and we've heard this all along, from the chat rooms, which now it's evolved to so much more, and social media, is that you have these predators posing and then trying to strike up a conversation, maybe in a video game, and hey, you're really good at this. this, and they think it's another kid or whatever, and well, let's meet sometime and trade Pokemon cards, or who knows.
Right.
That's literally how it happens.
That's literally how it happens. And I think children who have social media accounts put all kinds of stuff out there, you know, on their Instagram, their Facebook, their whatever they're on. And it's not hard for a predator to scroll through,
find out what their interests are, everything.
Exactly.
Okay, and then
target them.
All right, so what can parents do? I mean, as I said, I was very aware of this, and I just think that these victims in human trafficking and the like, there's a lot of reasons why they get caught up on it. But I would think the vast majority of them are ones that come from whatever kind of family background and support system they have, probably ain't the best. And I'm not saying there aren't exceptions to that rule, or they don't have parents that were really engaged or keeping it or sitting down and talking with them and understanding it. Because I mean, I let my son continue to play games. We monitored it. We had talks about it. And you know, if you're playing these games and anyone ever asks you any question, you know what that's all about. I made no bones about it. I said, anyone asks you a question, it's not some friendly kid. 100% of the time, it's a sex offender trying to get you. I told him that. Now, whether that was true or not, I wanted to scare the crap out of him. And it worked. And he's a smart kid, and he stuck to that. So what do parents do on this front? I mean, aside from literally shutting them off, and look, they love their video games. We're not going to do that if we can do it safely.
I think you got to talk to your kids.
Yes. Right?
If you're not talking to your kid, I tell parents all the time, if you're not talking to your kids, somebody else will, and you won't like what they tell them.
That's good.
I have a 15-year-old, and I'm.
Yeah, what do you do?
I'm very good. Well, we are Android people, and so I have Family Link downloaded onto my kids' tablets and phone, and so I control how much access she has to it and what apps she's allowed to download. So
she's your daughter. I guarantee you she's savvy. You've talked to her.
She's heard it since she was 3 or 4.
She knows. There's no chance of her being taken in by this.
Well, you know, I did have this sort of fear, I think, that, you know, oh my gosh, what if I had to issue an Amber Alert for my own child? And so I was probably a little overprotective. But she's not playing Roblox, for instance, because the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has horrendous warnings out on Roblox. And when she was younger, 9, 10, 11 years old, I think she thought she was the most abused child on the planet because she was the only kid not playing Roblox. But it's not worth it to me. No, not at all. And now, as a 15-year-old, she understands. She understands why I'm as protective of her. She understands, I think, what the dangers are. I think as a 15-year-old, her understanding of what the danger is far more complex now than what it was when she was 5 or 6. At 3, 4, 5, 6, you need to be talking to them about stranger danger, good touch, bad touch, you know, those sorts of things. As they age, you really got to start talking about the internet. You got to talk about sexting. You got to talk about sending images of themselves.
Right. Or receiving any, and how you deal with that.
Exactly. And so you've got to, my thought was always, if a predator or some bad guy gets to my kid once, that's on them. If it gets to my kid twice, that's on me. Because I didn't have the kind of dialogue where my child felt like they could come and talk to me about it. You think Larry Nassar, USA Gymnastics, right? I think he's up to 500 victims at this point. Think Jerry Sandusky at Penn State. So it's not just girls, it's boys too. When you talk about youth pastors, let's take this back to trafficking. You talk about youth pastors and some of the individuals who've been arrested over the years for coming to pay to have sex with kids. People who prefer children, people who have a preference for children, pedophiles can be very predatory in nature. They will seek opportunities. They will engage in occupations and vocations that allow them to have access to children. Of course. 100% of the time. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be scared about every soccer coach and every youth pastor, but it means you need to do some due diligence and you need to keep your eyes open. Because when you have a predator like that in your midst, they're not just grooming the child, they're grooming you too. I can't tell you how many times I've heard it.
Let your trust down?
Absolutely. Every time we've ever gone and arrested somebody in the community, whether it's a karate instructor or a soccer coach, the parents immediately say, you're wrong, you've entrapped him, that couldn't happen. And what they're really saying is, I couldn't have been wrong
about this person. They don't want to admit it.
Right.
They don't want to admit
because
it.
they got groomed too.
And then, of course, they've realized what's happened to their child, and they're going to have to live with that guilt. Not that it's necessarily their fault, because these
Right.
guys are very slick.
Oh, very.
Yeah,
very.
listen, we'll take a break. This is really good information. We'll be back. We can take more phone calls if you'd like, 737-7587. If you've dealt with this or a question, Margie Quin's here. More with her right after this.